Welcome back in for another episode of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, and joining me this week, Coach Guy Suttleback as always, and sitting in the guest chair this week, Paul Foster with us. Glad to have Paul with us this week. And each week we talk about our high school football teams in Shelby, Cleveland County, and then we'll look ahead to some college football. We had one game this past week, so we'll have fun talking about that one. And then we'll do a little Carolina Panthers and NFL wrap at the end of the show. But let's get started, boys. It was a good weekend I wore shorts to the Shelby Kings Mountain game, and I was a little cool by the time that one got over with. But great night for high school football. Let's go in alphabetical order as we usually do. Coach Suttle, Burns at home against Forest View. We said, I think if I'm quoting correctly, last Monday we said 3 or 4 touchdowns. It was a 25-point win for Burns on Friday night.
Yeah, and it was a good tune-up for them. I mean, it was not a surprise that they beat Forest View as badly as they did, and it's a great tune-up. I mean, you can go out there, you can play, you can get all the bugs out. Coach has got film to go over with his players today before practice, and it was just a good warm-up for the season against Forest View.
Forest View 2-8 last year, lost to Burns last year in the opener 42-0. Paul, we kind of expected the win that Burns had on Friday night. One thing we said last week, it's wild how in Gaston County it's pretty much South Point year in and year out, and then everybody else, it seems like it's just a crapshoot as to whether they'll be 8-2 or 2-8. But here's Forest View getting off to another strong start to a 2-8 campaign.
Yeah, Cleveland County football, when they are able to go to battle with those Gaston County schools, of course, we generally know how that's going to turn out, and that certainly was the case for Burns. Coach Devine coming into this new season, of course, he's been around for a while now, and somebody like Elijah Goodson in that game, you didn't have to have, I mean, Burns did it in so many ways. I think he was the leading rusher with like 75. You didn't have to have anybody over 100. He also had 8 tackles on defense, so right there's evidence of somebody going both ways, and a good job that he did.
No question about that. So the Burns Bulldogs get off to a great start, 32-7, the final over Forest View. And we'll talk about it in the second segment now, but the big county matchup coming up now for the Bulldogs on Friday night. Let's flip it on over to the Battle of Buffalo Creek. I think it was the 103rd edition of that contest, and if I understood Coach Jeff Jones correctly in the pregame, there was a 1943 break in the action, probably due to the war and all kinds of different other things, but otherwise it would be the longest continuous rivalry in the state of North Carolina. And just to clear up a mistake I made last week in saying that Kings Mountain winning at Shelby 2 years ago was the first time since Aubrey Hollifield played back in '86. They actually won there in the COVID year. And as a matter of fact, Coach, Kings Mountain had won 4 out of 5 in the series going into Friday night's game over at Blount Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, it was a nice thing to remember. We forget about that spring of 2021 and going back into those situations. But I thought it was a good game. I thought that Shelby made some mistakes early, and they worked them out during during halftime, and just really came out in the second half and dominated the game in the second half. It could have been worse, but it was a good game for Shelby, and it got a lot of those mistakes and a lot of those early season things that happens to all of the teams, got those out of the way early.
Paul, one of the things that is a key, obviously, for Shelby coming back with a quarterback that the other 3 county teams are looking for one this year. And Land Farmer was able to do some things with that young offensive line. He was able to get rid of the ball quickly. Did have a couple of interceptions on some long balls down the field, but for the most part was pretty accurate. and looked like a returning quarterback for Shelby on Friday night.
He certainly did, David. He was 16 of 32. I think I'm pretty close on that for 251 yards in the passing department. You mentioned the 3 interceptions, but, you know, even returning veterans, because of that first game of the season, you know, you're going to have to shake some of that off. But, yeah, it's great when you get a returning quarterback, and Farmer certainly is going to do a good job for Shelby.
Golden Lions, and you're seeing some highlights here, also did a nice job running the ball. Tristan Tate returns for Shelby as a senior running back. Got injured during the playoffs last year to finish out his junior year. But, Coach, he didn't look like he missed a beat Friday night.
No, and it had to be a little bit when we saw it on the highlights earlier when he did the little helicopter spin into the end zone. That has to be a little concerning at times. But thought this was a big play in the game. Right here that Shelby had gone down and scored and comes right out and gets the ball back on the ensuing kickoff. But you're right, Tate looked good, getting thrown for a loss there a little bit, but all in all, it was a good game. And Paul brought it up with the interceptions. You don't want that, you know, you don't want your quarterback to get down on himself or start pressing. So the running game helped there. It was, hey, let's hand it off. Let's keep the ball moving, keep the chains moving. We'll get back in rhythm.
Talking about Kings Mountain a little bit on offense, kind of a tale of two halves there with two different quarterbacks getting significant playing time. Wilson Velez played in the first half primarily. Armstrong played in the second half primarily. Armstrong, a lefty, that always poses a little difference for defenses because you don't see a lot of left-handed quarterbacks around here. Threw a couple of touchdown passes to Vaughn Paul. Vaughn is a stud, and if they can figure out if Armstrong is the guy or if Wilson Velez is the guy, whoever ends up being the guy for them at quarterback can figure out a way to get it to Vaughn, they're going to be pretty good this year.
Yeah, Vaughn is a sensational player. Looking at the highlights and some of the information I'd seen online, he had a big gain of about 100 yards of receiving. Kings Mountain, I think, if they're like they were last year, they're going to want to go to the air more than anything else, and Vaughn's going to be that key guy. But I would think, hopefully, going forward, they do run the ball more, and they're more successful because their leading rusher just had about 25 yards, and that was it. Otherwise, they were going to need the defense to come through, and they were going to have to go to the air and be successful.
Coach, speaking of the running game, Josiah Hill, we know his dad, Javion, played at Shelby back when we were there, and Josiah, outstanding running back for Kings Mountain. The balance that Paul's talking about, that's going to be a key for Kings Mountain as well.
Yeah, and I think they have to give it to Josiah a little more. It's just an opinion, in that it takes a little bit of pressure off the quarterback. We talked about Land's a returning starting quarterback and needed a little bit of a break, a little bit to clear everything out and use the running game to move the sticks, move the chains. You know, Hill has got to carry the ball some to take some pressure off of the quarterback, basically just so he can breathe and catch up with the game. A lot of times the speed of the game dictates whether or not you need to run the ball. And sometimes you got to give your defense a break. There's a lot of quick 3 and outs with a long game because the clock stops when you're throwing the football as much as Kings Mountain did.
Well, and obviously there you see the final score, 32-16. Shelby pulls away late. I'm going to tell you, though, one of the keys for Shelby, you wondered who was going to step in and replace Isaiah Bridges. Not sure that anybody is going to be that one guy, but Tyler Morgan, 2 touchdowns on Friday night, Coach. And the second one, I mean, pulled away from everybody that was chasing him. So I wasn't familiar with Tyler's speed. He absolutely, it was a 73-yarder, and he absolutely turned on the Jets in that one.
I'm telling you, and it goes back as a testament to what is done in January, February, March, April in the weight room. You know, this bigger, faster, stronger. There is a reason that all these Olympic athletes are tested for steroids. It's because the stronger you get, the faster you move. And so, you know, with the good program that Shelby High School has in the weight room, you know, the speed of the game is going to always be there in Cleveland County football, period.
No doubt about that. So we're reaching the end of this first segment where we talk about our two games from this past Friday night. When we come back after the break, we'll talk about the three games coming up on the schedule this coming weekend. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll try a little college and a little pro football to finish this up. We'll do all that when we come back. You're watching Armchair Quarterback.
The only prediction I'd make is I'd be pretty willing to bet I won't be doing it in 20 more years.
My question is, where's our residual checks?
144 have taken Republican ballots, and Wes and two others have taken Libertarian ballots.
Pravda, however, TBS, however.
Wes.
West.
Ladies
and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Education is our most powerful tool to improve and change our world. Hi, I'm Rhonda Benfield, your host for School Matters. Join me for a new program every other week with information from and about the students and staff of Cleveland County Schools. Discover what our schools are doing to challenge students and help them reach their full potential. You can catch us on Spectrum Cable Channel 19 or stream us live on c19.tv.
Welcome back for our second half of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, along with Coach Guy Suttle and Paul Foster. Each week, again, we talk about our Cleveland County football action, and we got a good schedule for you this week. Let's start with Burns and Crest. It's a tremendous county matchup. It has been for years. Both schools opening the same time back in the late 60s, and they have been dogfighting ever since then. And, Coach, let's talk about the fact that Crest didn't play last week and whether or not that gives Burns a little bit of an advantage as they travel over to Sid Bryson Stadium on Friday night.
Yes, I would say that it does give them an advantage. It's huge to be able to line up. They had to go through all phases of the game, all three phases, the kicking game, offense, defense. But the big thing is they got out there on the field and felt that Friday night excitement. They didn't have to wait 3 or 4, or this Friday night, they won't have to wait as long to come for the game to come to them. Crest, on the other hand, you know, if you go into this game and you don't have any illegal procedure penalties, hey, it's going to be a great, great game for Crest. The reason being is I think that these first games, that's what you kind of get out of. You're used to, you know, you're hearing the crowd noise. A lot of times you're up on your fingertips ready to go, and you'll jump off sides. That's not going to happen to Burns this week. I didn't have any stats as far as how that happened last week against Forest View, but it was a great tune-up in that it was a live game. Crest has got to go through that, plus with a county rivalry against Burns.
Paul, he makes a great point there. Shelby had just a ridiculous number of offside on defense and false starts on offense against Kings Mountain on Friday night. If Crest has that kind of night against Burns, and Burns is, as he said, more settled because they played this past Friday night, that could be a seriously deciding factor in a close ball game.
It really could. There's so many factors going into that one, and that is the fact that Greg Lloyd returns to Crest, brand new head coach. So many guys are gone now. Quarterback Husky, A.J. Adams. We could go on and on about how many seniors Crest lost. But let's forget about all that, David. You said it. It's the things you run into every year. Too many penalty flags. Being in the backfield and not having the play calls correct and using timeouts that you might need down the stretch in the game. So all of those things could be factors as well. And like you said, Burns has got the 1 week tune-up already.
One of the interesting things that somebody pointed out to me last year, Crest went undefeated in the county, and all 3 of those games were on the road. And now this year, and I'm really not sure how we got to that point because I don't think any of the county ADs want to have a year where they don't have at least one county matchup at home. So anyway, I'm not sure how we got there. But the flip side of that is now, Coach, they get all 3 of them at home this year, and having Burns at home will be an advantage for Crest regardless of whether they played in the opening week or not.
Yeah, I mean, the AD, Jeff Melton, is going to be loving it. in the even numbered years and kind of wondering how his dollars are going to stretch on the odd. But in the football sense of it, yeah, they went undefeated on the road. Now if it can go undefeated at home, and I think that does give Crest an advantage. They're a little bit at a disadvantage because Burns has already played a live game or a real game and got the whole 4 quarters in. Crest is coming off just a few minutes in the Jamboree. Really not 2 good scrimmages. When I say not 2 good ones, combined, they didn't have very long with Monroe. You know, all of those are factors going into this first game. The fact that they are at home does help, but Burns would definitely have an advantage as far as that game under their belt. As far as how the game's going to come out, I think it's going to be really close, but I think Crest prevails.
Paul, you mentioned Coach Lloyd coming back to Crest. Obviously, and this is no shot at how old Coach Lloyd is, because you can see the gray in my beard, but it's not like Coach Lloyd is a young coach coming back to his alma mater. He's got a solid career under his belt. As a matter of fact, technically he retired from Kings Mountain, and people thought maybe he was done coaching altogether. Well, he is returning to Crest. How big is this, or not how big it is, but how big of a deal is that for him coming back to his alma mater to coach on Friday night?
I think it's got to be a very big deal. I mean, this was a defensive-minded coach before he got the head coaching job and went on to Kings Mountain across the county. He was there in the Roy Kirby years, a lot of successful Crest years. And for those of us, especially that have been around long enough, like the 3 of us, especially Guy and his connection with Crest as well, Greg, what I was going to say, if I can get my mind together, many of us that have known the history of Crest football remember those successful years. Some people, he will be a new name, but yeah, you're right. They're getting an established veteran that certainly knows something about Crest football.
Well, go ahead,
I'm
Coach.
sorry.
No,
It was a very difficult time when Greg left Crest High School as an assistant. He was offensive coordinator in 03 and 04, back-to-back state championships, when he went to East Gaston as the head coach, and he felt like it was time to become a head coach. But it was a difficult decision for Greg leaving that situation, especially off of those 2 very successful years. I can just remember when, on my return back to Crest, as a graduate of Crest, how Coach Lloyd's the one that made me feel welcome, and kind of went out of his way to say, "Hey, you're gonna like it here." It's made me feel welcome coming back to Crest after being absent for so many years.
Well, it's definitely a big one on Friday night. Crest at home against Burns. It's a county rival. Doesn't mean anything in the conference standings, but that you can throw that mess out, because this is a big game, and it'll be interesting to see. Next one up, Cox Mill at Kings Mountain. Cox Mill took a beating last week from Charlotte Christian, 42-7, I believe, or 49-7, excuse me, was the final in that one. Cox Mill, obviously, got to go to Kings Mountain. Kings Mountain's licking the wounds a little bit, Coach. I would think that this one is going to be advantage Mountaineers.
Advantage Mountaineers. They're gonna see if they don't feel good about themselves today. Next Monday they're going to feel real good about themselves. Cox Mill, and not taking anything away from Charlotte Christian, because we have some history. Cleveland County Schools have some history with private schools out of Charlotte, and they're no joke. They're the real deal. And not taking anything away from Charlotte Christian, but Cox Mill took a beating, and Cox Mill Chargers. So we'll see how that one rolls along. But I think Kings Mountain, being at home, being wanting to prove themselves as a good football team, Cox Mill is going to pay the price.
And some of those things that we were already talking about in terms of the Burns and Crest game, Kings Mountain did, even though in a losing effort, got some of that stuff out of their system, some of those turnovers, some of those early penalties. So they should be a little more ready to go, if anything, in week 2, and they're at home against Cox Mill.
Yeah, it's going to be the second season for Coach Straight Heron. I really believe that I was up in the mountains for that Reynolds game that ended Kings Mountain's season last year, and that was a tough way for them to go out. I think they've got a lot to say and prove this season still, even though they lost a lot of talent, in particular from the defensive side of the ball. And I think it's certainly, since they didn't get it done against Shelby, it's certainly going to be an opportunity to take it out on somebody this coming Friday night.
All right, so that's Cox Mill at Kings Mountain. Go over to John Gamble Stadium and check that one out. And then the final game of the week, AC Reynolds comes down the mountain to take on Shelby. AC Reynolds 0-1 after a 19-16 loss to West Forsyth. And Coach, they lost to West Forsyth 8-7 last year. They were in a dogfight with Shelby. We talked about Land Farmer returning starting quarterback in only his second start last year, threw a touchdown pass with no time remaining, and they called Shelby for holding, or otherwise that game would have gone into overtime. So AC Reynolds is going to have their hands full again on Friday night coming to Shelby.
No, absolutely. There's going to be a great atmosphere, certainly in the return game at Shelby at home. AC Reynolds, they have, Coach Shane Laws has history at Shelby. They've played for so long against each other non-conference. And so it's gonna be a great environment for a great high school football game. Just a little bit of tidbit there. The quarterback for AC Reynolds is Eli Hamrick. Some people may remember his dad as quarterback at Crest, Ryan Hamrick, back in the '94 state championship year. It could be a game of two quarterbacks, but I think Shelby has the advantage. Shelby looked really impressive against Kings Mountain in that second half.
The one thing I remember about AC Reynolds coming to Shelby was Rico Dowdle. He's a running back for the Dallas Cowboys now, and that joker had a big night that night over at Shelby. And Shelby still won the game. But there's the week 2 matchups. Burns at Crest, Cox Mill at Kings Mountain, AC Reynolds at Shelby on Friday night. So you got 3 games in the county. Man, it doesn't get any better than that. Go find out what app they're using and buy a ticket, or go to the gate, whatever you got to do. I don't know. But check them out on Friday night. 3 good ones to start with. Let's talk about college football just a little bit. We'll switch gears. We had one game on the calendar. Actually, there were a couple of games on the calendar, but one game for our area, or our region, I guess we'll say. And Florida State and Georgia Tech went to Dublin, Ireland to play an ACC kickoff game, and the Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech stunned preseason number 10 Florida State, Coach.
It was stunning to see that score. And what is so amazing, I look on some of the sites, and somebody was like, "Can't believe it. Florida State got beat by Georgia Tech." And then one of the replies was, and I hadn't thought about this, "Hey, don't count Georgia Tech lightly or say it was a fluke, because they had a great time in the portal, in the transfer portal." And I thought that was really interesting. You don't think about those sorts of things in college football, that, hey, not did they had a great year recruiting and had one of the best freshman class in the nation, they had a great transfer portal. And that's just something that's going to be really tough, and we will explore it more as the season goes along. But this is going to be a trend that's going to be tough for high school players. If you've got, and I'm going to use a round number, 20 scholarships available, and you use 15 of them in the transfer portal, that only leaves 5 scholarships for high school players. That's a tough go.
Paul, it just depends on whether or not coaches are really buying into the portal. I mean, Dabo Swinney is one of the highest profile coaches in the country, and he is vehemently against the portal and is on record as to why he doesn't use the portal. But here's the situation. You got a second-year head coach at Georgia Tech, a first-year defensive coordinator. They go out and I don't know how many guys they found, but they went out. They found enough to beat number 10 on the road to start the season.
They sure did. I found it fun, all the build-up, that it was in Ireland. Pat McAfee and his ESPN shows, a lot of people were already over there days prior to the game itself. I had a chance to see a good bit of it on Saturday, and I just got that feeling that Florida State goes right down and scores. Everybody, on their side feeling good. Georgia State, they make a statement by coming right back and scoring. They didn't go for two, so we had an 8-7 game. And then the scoring kind of, dried up for a while. But as the game went along, it was exciting. We had a competitive game, and Georgia Tech, what a great start to the ACC season.
Well, I mean, Florida State was woe is me and all over the place when they got left out of the college playoffs last year after going undefeated. This year, no such luck on the undefeated part, so we'll have to wait and see if they can rebound and get back in the national hunt with the 12-team playoff. I mean, anything's possible. I want to mention that Gardner-Webb opens the season on Thursday night this week. The Gardner-Webb University Running Bulldogs will be at Wofford. And, Coach, I don't know that much about Wofford these days, but for years and years, Wofford was an absolute juggernaut running that triple option. I'm not sure even what they run anymore, but I would assume not an easy place to start the season for the Running Bulldogs.
Yeah, I believe it's Mike Ayers started all of that run for Wofford, and you got the Terriers and the Bulldogs. So, it's going to be one of those games. But, it's kind of like you were talking about. South Point is always consistent in Gaston County. The thing about Wofford is they run an offense that is a little strange in today's terms as far as running triple option and running the football as much as they have. And for, the entire spring and most of the summer, definitely the spring, you're practicing for and against spread offenses. And then you come up with preseason, okay, guys, for these 2 weeks, we got to get ready for Wofford and change your strategies.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that one comes out. We'll keep up with the Running Bulldogs as we go out throughout the course this season. New head coach over at Gardner-Webb, and as Coach Lamb ended up at East Tennessee State University, so we'll keep an eye on that as well as the college season goes on. And we'll talk more about that 12-team playoff, certainly closer to a time where we may have an idea of which teams are going to get into that thing. Let's talk a little Carolina Panthers. Finally got to see Paul, Bryce Young and the starters against Buffalo in the final preseason game. And, a win's a win. We'll take it.
If you're the Panthers, you'll take it preseason, so we certainly hope we're going to see some of that in the regular season. I keep hearing that, yes, when we got to see Bryce and the offense, that this new coach and this offense is better suited to what he was doing at Alabama. But we know he still doesn't have, even on the pro level, what he was gifted with at Alabama. Still going to take some time, but certainly improvement is coming. It's still going to be one step at a time, though.
Coach, I think he really only played one drive, Bryce Young that is, but he took him right down the field for a touchdown. So if you're only going to play one drive, a touchdown drive is a pretty good one to play.
Yeah, that's the one to get out on. And going back to not being surrounded with the talent that he had at Alabama. Alabama's got more first-round draft choices than the Panthers did last year. So, but I think, again, that they also have tried, and I'm going back to last year, they have tried to improve the offensive line, and they did so. And I think that showed up on the first drive also.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I feel like that just for my money, the San Francisco 49ers are still probably the best team in the NFC. And we were talking about could Kansas City three-peat, and my statement on that is until somebody shows they can beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and if you're the Miami Dolphins and you don't want to play in sub-zero weather, then you win enough in October, November that you get to host Kansas City this year in the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. Hey, I'll tell you what, we just talk football, have a good time, and next thing you know, it's 30 minutes have gone. Stay with us and join us next week right here on Armchair Quarterback. That'll do it for this week.